are back with another amazing episode of Zag Talk, joined today by Greg and Sela. Hey, gang.
Hi, Jonah. How exhausted are you, Jonah? Tell us about Herbivore.
I'm so blissfully exhausted from Herbivore, our event that was last week. And that cues me up. Today's guest is going to be Beryl Sanders, head of grocery and retail partnerships for Uber, with a Q&A we did live at Herbivore. Before we get to that, yeah, the event was fantastic. I mean, I'm sorry for anyone listening now that didn't get to join us in person. The sun was shining. We had so many happy attendees, big product launches, great panels and speeches. I will get into some of the news that we broke at the conference, but Greg, Sela, you should have been there. Come on.
Sorry to miss it this year. I'm still dreaming about that mango I had last time. How was the food this year? That's the key part.
Yeah, we put the street and street food. The food was great. I'd say if anything, we sort of were too successful. This was the first year that we had like food lines. So note to self, keep the food abundant. Don't want anyone waiting for their free delicious street food. But yeah, I don't know, Sela, we're gonna fly you out next year too, no?
Yes, it was actually my birthday when it was happening, and I was just thinking I wish I was at Herbivore.
That was our tagline for this year's event. It's Herbivore, it's Sela's birthday. But happy birthday. So I think just to recap briefly some of the more interesting things from the event. Obviously, we had some great panels. The head of transportation for LA28, regulator from CPUC. We managed to work in basically a surprise appearance from Councilmember Nithya Raman, which for anyone that's been watching LA politics, is she will either become our next mayor or she'll come in second place as next mayor. So she's also obviously had a very strong record on public transit and urban development. So that was a lot of fun. But you want to hear some launch news? I don't know.
I was going to say, Herbivore, it's the place where you break news. Let's hear it.
It's the place where you break news. So we had a couple big launches live from our parking lot. One, Uber Eats was launching returns on their platform. So the idea basically being that if you order something from a Best Buy or a Dick's Sporting Goods and you don't like it, I can't imagine why you wouldn't like your Pet Food Express purchase, but you can then have a courier come pick it back up from you and return it to the merchant. So interesting kind of reverse logistics, always been the messier side of delivery. And then we had Fastport, which is Honda's e-quad delivery vehicle, sort of upstart subsidiary, launched a partnership with Bird, which I thought was very cool. And so sort of aligned brands. Originally, I was hoping this would mean that you could launch a borrowed e-quad on Bird, but we're not there yet. But basically, they'll be using them as support vehicles. So for the Bird juicers and fleet rebalancers, instead of getting in a yucky gas-powered truck, they're going to be doing it in a nice electric pedal cargo vehicle. So green and spiritually aligned, let's say. And then we had a couple of launches, Robotis and Nubility, two Korean delivery bot companies making the U.S. launches. Another company, RidePro Team, launching in the U.S. So lots of cool mobility startups at Herbivore. You had to be there, Greg. You had to be there, Sela.
Sounds great. Did you have a favorite session? Can you pick one?
Oh, you want me to pick a favorite child?
Asking her to pick amongst
cruel.
There's children here.
I'm going to say no. I mean, I think honestly the speech we had from Nithya Raman, that was a highlight of the day. And also just as a event planning person, that was a real, fun one to squeeze and pull off, but we did it. We stuck the landing. And so, the mayor's race is basically a couple months from now. So it's a tight one. So fun to be involved in that conversation, right?
Nice. I think it's a
Amen to that. You're legit when you're getting the California elected showing up, Jonah. I remember back in the day at Commotion, we got Scott Wiener. That's what I felt like we were a real conference. So congrats. You're a real boy now.
Thanks, Bob.
Whistle stops on the tours.
Well, I think enough about me. My ears are already burning. We got so much other news to get into, starting with some big numbers. So $10 billion. Is that even a cool number anymore, Greg?
$10 billion, that's table stakes, man. But who got it? That's very nice. Pat them on the head. $10 billion.
That's a nice little chunk of change. But Uber is committing $10 billion to robotaxis. And so in some sense, that's not all that new, right? We've seen them making these announcements. What's new is this sort of complete picture of how much they're spreading across all the different players. I was actually chatting with someone that worked at Lucid at the event, and they were like, yeah, we had the big deal with Uber announced. We got super excited. And then, a couple months later, we saw, you're doing deals with all the other EV companies. We don't feel like we're that special anymore. What gives? So $10 billion, that buys you a lot of chips in the race, no?
It's true. It's like someone would call it a portfolio strategy. Others might call it promiscuous. But yeah, it's interesting to see the mainstream outlets really sit up and take notice at just how far around Uber has spread its bets, as we have granularly detailed on this podcast over the last few months.
So how much are you spending on AV bets personally?
I
Billy?
can top that.
Yeah. No problem. Yeah.
Well, I think
What-
it's interesting, like, this overall take by, I read Benedict Evans's newsletter, which arrived shortly before recording this too, and mentioned this as well. But
We're
like,
allowed to
it's been
do
interesting,
that. We're
like,
allowed to read Benedict.
every OEM, everyone's getting back into the race, in this, given, for that whole AV winter, and we've talked about this before, but like, I think I just saw news like Aptiv is back, and it's like, I just feel like a lot of these AV
Oof.
companies and their partnerships with Hyundai, for example, and others that were dormant are now here. Like, Cruise, GM cut bait on it because of its own problems with, dragging pedestrians along the street, for example, and lying to regulators. But like now everyone has to get back in, and just Uber is just that much further
It's
ahead of the pack.
2021 again.
It really is. Zerp's back, baby. Let's go.
Pay
Energy
no attention
crisis,
to the
high interest
to the
rates,
high
forget
interest
it.
rates. Yeah.
Forget it. Zerp's back.
Well, if Zerp is back, something else is back, and
I say we don't have any SPAC news this week, do we,
that's
Jonah?
baseball bats in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
This one's just a fun follow-up on a story from a couple weeks ago where a delivery bots finally made it to the city of brotherly love. So AvRide launched in Philadelphia in March, and we were like, remember what happened to HitchBot? How the Philadelphians beheaded it? Well, they're up to their old tricks again. They've been bashing in these delivery bots. It kind of feels like there's just a general backlash against the bots these days, which saddens me. I'm pro delivery bot. Glendale, California passed a moratorium on them, which is a slightly less violent response. But yeah, it's hard to say, like, is this like sort of protecting the jobs, or we just don't like these new things in the public right away? But what's driving the sentiment? I don't know.
I take your pick, Jonah. I mean, like, taking out some delivery bots is a calm, measured response, compared to like, emptying a clip at Sam Altman's house, and other measures that have happened recently. So, but yeah, I mean, this is it's very funny when people talk about the tech lash, because like it's never really amounted much, but it'll be very interesting to see if we do see some sustained, punch a robot, as we have seen.
Remember when people were
TikTok.
dancing on top of the Google shuttles to stop them? We've had all sorts of ineffectual measures.
It's another iteration on this, but but God bless the people of Philly. I mean, to me, my takeaway from the story is living up to their reputation. Nobody does it better or harder than the Yinzers. So God bless
Sela,
them.
do you know what a Philadelphia is?
No, I don't. Enlighten me.
Do they sell Philadelphia cream cheese in the UK?
That's what you're leading
yeah,
with,
of course they do. Yeah.
Well, that's the proudest cultural export from Pennsylvania. Obviously, so.
It's
I would
great,
argue,
to be
I would
fair.
argue it'd probably be Tony Luke's, but I don't know how well they keep there. But the city of brotherly love, a city founded by religious extremists that Britain expelled so they wouldn't destabilize the crown. So who would have thought we would end up here? Who knows?
Yeah, we got to take you to Pennsylvania.
Mobility frontier. What else we got?
Well, I think
Speaking of robotics, and speaking
of robotics, speaking of what's old is new again, we've got another blast from the past. So Atoms, which is what Travis Kalanick rebranded his cloud kitchen / industrial conglomerate company, they've officially purchased Pronto, which is the mining AV company that's helmed by the former kind of convicted, I stole all these trade secrets and took them from one company to another engineer. So the don't play by the rules gang is back together. But it's interesting to sort of see this. We're doing robotic food, we're doing industrial mining. So I guess the throughput is just sort of like mechanization, but I don't know.
Useful robots, right? That was Travis's phrase for this one too. And yeah, it does just sort of reek of like putting the band back together, like I'm assembling a team kind of thing. But it will be interesting to see, can the sum of that be greater than the parts? And I think, I'm in the camp of those who argue that like Travis is really just, desperately in need of a new story to tell to get some recapitalization of the whole thing, because it's sort of been a fizzle as a play there, at least in terms of like unlocking shareholder value.
Well, it feels like, he's been very like, I want to be out of the limelight. I got so burned by the media last time. And so, yeah, he's been like very stealthy this time. And I feel like maybe too stealthy in the sense where it's like, there isn't like a very familiar brand. There isn't really like a public narrative. And so I think if you want to, get the $1 trillion valuations, you sort of need that glow, whether it's all good or bad. I think you gotta come play in the limelight a little bit, which he's sort of coming back around to.
I was to say, you know, who you can learn from on that score, Mark Lore, right? Like it's so funny that Wonder gets like a lot of the ridicule from the cool kids at the table. And you would know over there at Curb Before, you guys are the cool kids.
Oh,
But it's funny because like Travis is running a very similar playbook of like, let me just put together this dog's breakfast conglomerate and like, and then we'll tell a story around it and see what happens. But I get a feeling Travis will do better than Mark. But we'll see who gets to IPO first if that ever happens again.
who's holding the bag?
Yeah, who is old the bag?
And so one more baddie for the storyline. So what's Elon up to now?
Oh, well, you know, we see on social they might actually be expanding the robotaxi network, Dallas and Houston, you know, all that delightful stuff. Although apparently what the service areas appear to be tiny postage stamp size. No one's quite sure exactly where it is. But again, speaking about growth stories, here we go. Robotaxi dominance. We're now in 2 other very large cities, even if it's in very small areas of it.
Yes, very, very small. The Houston geofence looks to be about 25 square miles. Dallas about 20 square miles. That's not going to get you very far
In galactic
in the
Houston, yeah,
sprawl
that's,
of
I mean, yeah.
Tejas. But yeah, I don't know. Sela, would you get in the Elon's robotaxi? Would you trust it with your life?
No comment.
That's very no comment is honestly very kind.
There you go. Well, I want to highlight a more prosaic one that I know of late because it's a personal one. Back when I was at Urban X, we had Upshift, which is a little upstart, basically sort of like remote operations rental car, deliver it to you. And they just signed a deal with Elmo, which I will not say Sesame Street IP, as all yours have weighed in on this one too. But I thought it was interesting of like basically doing tele-operation for car rentals. And this is something that I just thought was interesting to me, partly because I know Upshift, but also partly because this has struck me for a long time as a no-brainer of mobility as a service stuff, of having the ability to rent a car, have it be delivered to me, and then have it drive itself away. You know, I would sign up for Porsche Passport. I think I've made this assertion about 7 times on our podcast over the years that I would sign up for Porsche Passport, for example, in a heartbeat if I
This
really could
podcast is not brought to
rotate
you by
through.
Porsche Passport.
Well, rotate through a portfolio, right? Like, you know, like auto OEM as a service, right? Like, just let me get it on a dealership and have the dealership deliver me a different car every day that I can then borrow out of their fleet, kind of stuff. And this is like one baby step closer to that, of like having a rental that can do that. It's not
Yeah,
autonomy,
and it's
but
not
it at
autonomous.
least
It's
makes it easier.
teleoperated. We've
Yeah.
seen some other companies also kind of toy at this partnership of car rental mixed with teleops. I agree with you. It makes a lot of sense from like a
Yeah.
fleet rebalancing convenience perspective.
I can't get $1 trillion TAM out of it, but it strikes me as a lot more prosaically interesting, personally.
I mean, this one, it's a little bit, to me, small potatoes. I feel like, and I don't mean this to
Oh,
be
sure.
mean to Upshift, but they've got like 7 cars in San Francisco,
Yeah.
and they've been doing this for like 15 years. So I'm impressed with their doggedness and their tenacity at sticking at it. But I mean, they started as sort of like one of those cars, like car lease on demand, sort of like, I want it for 10 minutes today and 2 hours tomorrow, right? Like somewhere between car sharing and car rental now.
Yeah, I would say, well, you know, again,
Mm.
love you, Ezra. Shout out to you. I'm not signing up for Next Republic crowdfunding event either. But someone should take this idea and run with it, please, because he's got lots of good ideas at the very least.
Yep, 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 yep. So working our way down the mobility size scale, let's talk a little bit on micro. Sela, please. We haven't had much from you.
Yes, so totally opposite of robotaxis, e-scooters. We did a deep dive into Jet, who are Kazakhstan based. Do you know them?
I know most of the Kazakhstan tech scene quite well, but this one has
But
escaped
not
me.
Jet. Well, they were founded in about 2021 in Kazakhstan, and they are one of the most dominant players in the region. And I think they claim about 70% market share in Kazakhstan. But now one of their biggest growth stories is coming from Brazil, where over half of their global fleet is now. So I think they launched in Brazil at the end of 2023. And since then, they've got over 40,000 e-scooters there. They've recorded 4 times ridership growth in 1 year. So it seems like they're growing massively in Brazil. It's a huge market for them. And we kind of sat down with them to dissect what's going on, and it's various things. So I think the main one is year-round riding conditions rather than, in Central Asia and Europe needing to dismantle everything every year for the winter time. So that's been something that's really helped them. And then the coastal cities, they're seeing really different ridership patterns. Rather than like kind of doing an A to B in the city, people are riding up and down the waterfront, and they're making longer trips, and it's just
Sort of
generally like
leisure
more reliable
rides.
service. Yeah. And then the regulation itself, like it's fragmented, which has been a barrier for them, but it's also probably, I think, from them a bigger barrier for other competitors to actually get into the market first. So I feel like Jet's kind of an overlooked success story right now. I think we should be
Sure.
paying a bit more attention to them.
Yeah, it's always good to learn from.
Get away from our Silicon Valley myopia. I will just say that as a dedicated Montreal winter Big Sea rider who loves bike share, I cannot imagine anything colder than like riding a scooter across Astana in the middle of winter where like the winds come across the steppe and cut right through you. So good for them for finding a warmer climate.
And I'm happy to see like the Soviet satellite state to Latin America connection is still strong.
I was to say that it very much is a non-aligned movement kind of thing there. That's good for them there. Lula approves this message for sure.
Non-aligned movement would be a great scooter brand. And what else? What kind of technology are they strapping to these scooters these days?
So we have Bolt's new model, which they are positioning as a kind of AI-equipped model designed to move from penalizing riders for bad behavior to just preventing it. And they're really positioning it as this kind of compliance-based model. It comes with an integrated screen display. It looks quite high-tech, and it's things like, operators are saying these capabilities all the time, but detecting pavement riding, no-go zones, sending alerts to riders in real time, also directing them to parking bays, which I thought was quite interesting.
Like with an on-screen, like little arrow, like the parking's to your right kind of thing?
I think so, yeah. And I think through alerts as well, like audio alerts, local languages.
That would be helpful because, yeah, I've certainly had that experience where you're trying to drop a scooter off and it turns out you're in a no parking zone. And you have
Yeah.
to take the picture on your phone and then it tells you have to get back on and it's sort of, you waste a minute. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
nice.
And then I think they've said that with these scooters in some markets, the technology means they won't need to take the end of ride photos because it will just know that they're there. And yeah, we'll see that roll out. I think it's starting in Belgium and Germany to begin with. They've invested so far, I think, 25 million euros.
25,000
No,
doesn't sound
25.
like the press
I'm used to
release.
European tech budgets being smaller than American ones. They're not that small.
Well, I
25
can say,
million euros.
I know Greg is just thrilled about the idea of more cameras in the public realm.
It just warms my heart. Yes.
Just
Well,
with the AI analysis of doing who knows what, all for the good, I'm sure. One thing I also saw in your write-up, Sela, when you covered the story was that the camera also has zebra crossing detection, which, in our side of the world, we would call it crosswalk. But I like the idea of, if a African animal crosses in front of your scooter, it'll let you know.
yeah, I think that's a future capability that they're hoping to incorporate. But yeah, I thought that was really cool as well. And traffic sign recognition and automatic school zone geofencing. So,
And in that case, is that for like it'll slow down your ride, or you can't park in front of a school? What are the school rules? Something.
I don't think this is part of it at the moment, but I imagine it will be things like, again, more real alerts, maybe issuing fines if you don't move.
Well, thank God there'll be fines. Well, and
revenue, baby.
even without all this
That's just
new
a prediction.
camera technology, it seems like we're trending in the right direction in terms of
Yes.
safety on scooters, no?
Exactly. So is it all paying off? Well, Micromobility for Europe, which is a kind of industry coalition, has found that shared bike and scooter injuries have dropped for the 5th year in a row, which is very promising. Obviously, this isn't just attributed to technological advancements. It's things like infrastructure improvements, rider education. But they found that shared e-bike trips saw greater progress than shared e-scooter trips. So we had in 2025 over a 70% increase in trips, but a nearly 20% decrease in injuries per million trips.
That's pretty good.
And then the trend did hold for e-scooters. We only saw just over a 1% drop in injuries per million kilometers traveled, but it's a continuous trend from 2021 of declining risk. So it's just very positive news to see that growth and safety can go hand in hand.
And Micromobility for Europe, that's Bolt, Dot, Lime, and Voy. And it's
Yes.
just so fun to say all those brand names together like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that only counting their own statistics, or is that even looking at other operators that might not be part of that coalition?
Well, it's based on 500 million trips. I'm not sure if it goes beyond theirs. It's definitely theirs, and then it might be some others as well.
Trips. And yes, I'd say Europe has certainly been better as a continent than we have in terms of building the infrastructure to make these safe and enable them and let them be kind of a nice first last mile device. So Americans, learn from this, please. Then one more fun use of camera and AI technology. Greg, what you got for us?
Well, it's just interesting. In the same vein of, basically using these vehicles as instruments to observe the built environment, Waymo and Waze, two great tastes to go great together over at Alphabet, announced their sort of latest as part of the Waze for Cities initiative, which goes back, I think, at least a decade here of the, hey, we've got this data. Would you like a few crumbs, offering it to cities? And so they announced a partnership this month here. Basically a new offering here to use the Waymos as giant detections for potholes and sort of street quality there, and offered up to partner cities. And the launch press release, had a quote from San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan, and I think my old New York University colleague Sarah Kaufman said it best, where Waymo showing the good neighbor principle in action here. Again, this here's some data, please
Thanks,
do not
Sarah.
regulate us, please don't be mad at us, kind of thing. And to me, it jumped out at me because it's interesting, because what's cool, like getting data from Waymo and Waze. What's really cool, building it yourself as a city and using your entire municipal fleets of vehicles to collect that data. And last fall at the Cornell Tech Urban Tech Conference, I moderated a panel on digital twins. And one of our panels was Katrina Quadra, who's a fellow at Cornell Tech now, and she's helping New York City DOT build its own digital twin of every street, all the street furniture, using it for maintenance. And I hope cities, won't be content to just be like, take whatever they get from Waymo and Waze, but like really invest in
I
this
hope
themselves.
the digital twin actively has the right number of trash bags sitting on the sidewalk too to make it authentically New York. My thought though
Fully
is
containerized trash now, Jonah. You got to get out east, man. You are not aware of what's going on with
we're
Mayor
living
Amdani
in
here.
the 20th century, baby. The one thing that I've always thought about these, and you've heard other kind of companies in this realm, whether it's the scooters or delivery bots, say, yeah, and we're going to start collecting the data and we're going to give it to cities. Isn't that
And
neat?
startups like
Um,
robotics that are going to operationalize it. Yeah, a lot of come and gone.
I've always heard the problem isn't that the city doesn't know where the potholes are. I mean, sure, they know where everyone is now, but the problem is money, like the money to fill the potholes. And then there's even this sort of, perverse incentive of like the city doesn't necessarily want to know where every pothole is because then it's got the legal liability that it should be fixing them, whereas it can just kind of play dumb if they don't know where there's one over there. Well, we'll get to it in capital year 2035. So Waymo, Waze, Alphabet, thank you for the data, but can we have a couple pennies to go fill them in with asphalt?
Well, we'll have to see. So it is. You're right. It is a budget priority concern. It is interesting watching Mayor Amdani in New York, do this big pothole offensive there.
Blitz. Yeah.
The numbers are up. They're collecting that data. So the question is like, why weren't they doing this before? But other priorities. I think you're right. And then of course a larger rethink of street prioritization. But that's what DOT is doing there under new commissioner Mike Flynn. So
Yes.
we'll see how it plays out.
Well, I'd say on that note, it's time to hear from our friends at the Uber's head of grocery and retail partnership.
Well, before we do that, Jonah, what's the unlikeliest thing you think Uber is going to deliver in the near future? I thought it was interesting they just started with Ace Hardware, so now I can get like a hammer delivered to me from
Well,
Uber
we
Eats.
get in this in
What
the
do you
talk.
want?
We talked about the evolution from restaurant to grocery to retail. What would be the weirdest thing that I would want to get on my Uber Eats delivery? Big and bulky. To me, that's always the fun one. Like, what's like the most unwieldy thing that I can have someone bringing me? I tried to have someone bring a bunch of gravel to my yard once, and I had to batch it up into a much smaller order,
Good call.
understandably.
Firewood and charcoal. Yes, you can imagine a couch. We'll figure something out.
Well, let's get into that with Beryl Sanders.
We're joined today by Beryl Sanders, head of grocery and retail partnerships at Uber. What excites me about this conversation is, one, Uber's been joining us on stage since the very beginning of Herbivore, so 6 years now. But the Uber Eats story actually goes back even longer than that, for a decade plus. And so we've sort of traced the evolution of delivery from restaurants to grocery stores to basically all of retail, where you can just get the entire world delivered at the click of a button. So Beryl, kind of walk us through that evolution.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Also, Jonah, thank you. These chairs are so comfortable, and so it's delightful to be able to sit in one. So Uber Eats is now over a decade old, which is absolutely amazing. I feel very lucky because I've actually been with Uber Eats for the full decade, which is exceedingly rare. I think I'm one of the only folks left in the business that have been with it for so long. And so I feel so lucky to have had this experience. For those of you who don't know, and I think everybody should, but rides obviously predated the Uber Eats platform, where you can call an Uber and go anywhere you want. But what actually also predated the Uber Eats platform is the fact that we actually used to have a service before Uber Eats where we would go into parking lots in 10 cities across US and Canada, and we would actually load restaurant meals into the back of Uber cars. And it was called Instant. And so really way back in the day, we were going to these parking lots and loading up this food, and then these drivers would drive around San Francisco, in my case, and deliver it to consumers. And that really was the first iteration of Uber Eats. But I think the thing that has echoed our entire journey is the fact that we are really on a mission to go anywhere and get anything. And so Eats was very organic for us. We were already delivering people to the places that they wanted to go, and we wanted to deliver the food that they love to them. And we saw the use case and we jumped on it, and it took a few iterations, but we got there. And I think that our grocery and retail story is actually very similar in the sense that we were delivering people food that they loved. We saw that they wanted to get groceries delivered that they love, and we jumped on that as well. And that really started in 2020, and then we acquired Corner Shop, and that really accelerated our growth in the grocery space. And then in the retail space, we started that in 2022, and it's been wildly successful for us, especially in the past year. We've had 1,000 net new global retail partners join us in 2025 with 50,000 storefronts in the US alone. And so it's really surpassed our wildest imagination. We're currently above a $12 billion run rate in gross bookings globally. And so that just shows you how massive the business is. But what I will say, the core of what we're trying to serve is the ability to go anywhere and get anything. And so how do we serve our customers best and really meet them where they are? And the sky is the limit for that. I think there will be even more use cases that we can't even think of that our consumers will show us that they want. And so lucky to have been here for the past decade and looking forward to a decade more.
Wow. And so as third-party delivery has expanded into all these other categories, obviously like the share of wallet, the share of mind in a consumer has expanded. How are you seeing sort of consumer behavior shift as it becomes part of their day-to-day shopping experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, look, I shop all the time, much to my husband's chagrin. I have 2 young kids. I shop when I am on my commute. I shop when I'm cooking for dinner and I forget an ingredient. I shop when I am putting my daughter to bed and she doesn't have the type of toothpaste she wants. I have the minty kind, not the blue sparkly kind, whatever, 4-year-olds. But what I will say to this group is that I think that piece of the instant on-demand use case is relatively new, but I'm still doing my weekly grocery shop, right? Like these things haven't replaced the need for a weekly grocery shop. And so the two go hand in hand. And I think that you're really seeing this when it comes to the results that we have. We're not replacing merchants' weekly in-store grocery shop or the people who order on their first-party delivery app. We're adding to it. And we really see it with the data, and this is why we brought on so many net new merchants. But we're really seeing the fact that we are, creating a completely incremental use case for these customers. And when we run these incrementality studies, we're seeing that almost all of these orders are entirely incremental. And so what I'll say to this group is I think the top-up use case is what makes us really special and what makes us really special to these merchants. And then what I think that makes Uber really makes us stand apart from our competitors is the fact that we have multiple modalities and we have multiple lines of business, and we're able to really synergize the rides and the Eats data that we have and bring it together. And so the concept of us, I actually just was talking to somebody on my team who was at a Home Depot QBR and he forgot his charger there, and he had to order a new charger from Best Buy on the Uber Eats app. But he was able to do that. Or the person who lands at an airport and forgot their charger and they need their charger delivered, we're able to target those customers. Or the person that wants the food delivery at their hotel room before they get there. Like, those are things that only Uber is able to do, and I think it comes together beautifully with our Uber One loyalty program, which brings all of our lines of business together. And so again, it really is just all about our use case of going anywhere and getting anything, and really meeting the customer where they are.
So if that's the customer side of the equation, what about the merchants? How are they basically evolving their operations to meet customers in this new sort of space?
Yeah. I will say my favorite part of my job is working with merchants, and I'm really not just saying this to this group. I think that they are so incredibly innovative, and I've learned so much from them over the years. I can't overstate that. I think the merchants that do the best are the ones that really understand what I was talking about before, which is there are 3 very different use cases. There's in-store, there's first party, and then there's the top-up. And so the ones that are solving for this are the ones that do it best. Like, the ones that really understand that we have a very specific use case and that it needs to be differentiated from their other channels. I will say, the ones that obviously put effort into merchandising and send us the best-in-class catalog files and are, paying for visibility on our app, those are the ones that obviously perform the best. But I'll say what Uber is responsible for is really making sure that these merchants are equipped with those insights. And so telling them, where their customers are ordering from, what they're ordering, when they're ordering, all of those things, like, we need to give to our merchants to make sure that they're showing up as well as possible. And then what I would say, to just add on a final point, is we're not just acting as a marketplace, like a third-party marketplace. We have a very large business, it's called Uber Direct, where we actually fulfill merchants' first-party orders. And for those, it's really important that we just show up as well as we can, because these are the merchants' customers, and obviously we want to give them a best-in-class experience. So orders that are accurate and reliable and on time, like, we really just want to make sure we show up for them.
So I think this audience, when we think about online delivery, we're mostly thinking about the sort of logistical side, goods moving around cities from a store to your door. But another part of the equation is like the discovery side. What used to be I'd walk down a main street, a high street, and see something interesting in the window. That all happens in your phone now. So how is Uber and how are your merchants sort of thinking about the merchandising when it's all just in a 4-inch square?
Yeah. I think a phone is bigger than 4 inches, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Not mine.
So. Okay, so what I'll say here is, obviously merchandising, we talked about a bunch. It's really important. We want to make sure that merchants are investing in it and thinking about it and all of the things. I think the other thing that I touched on but is really important is just our ads and offers business, which is, to your point, there's only so much room in this 4-inch square. I'm going to assume that that's the actual ruler size. And so how do you actually show up and make yourselves visible on our app? And I think that Uber offers some really interesting ways to do that. Of course, we have ads and offers on our Uber Eats app, but there's also, a lot of really great surfaces on our Rides app as well. Top of mind is Journey ads. You can see an ad now when you're in an Uber, as I did on my way here. And so I think that that's a really important ad surface that our merchants are investing in as well. I do think that the results are really there. We have more than 75% of our SMB merchants who are currently investing in ads or offers, and usually with an 8-to-1 return on investment. And so we're really seeing strong results. And a lot of that is because the user is going into our app with a use case. They want to find a restaurant to order dinner from, or they want to, order their groceries. Like, the conversion is high because, really the customer sentiment is there. I will also just say, on the retail side, something that I think is really important that merchants invest in case there are any merchants in the audience, is seasonal moments. So, for example, for Valentine's Day, we did over 100,000 deliveries for Valentine's Day of flowers in the US alone. And a lot of those merchants who drove those deliveries, paid for ads or offers on our platform and made sure that there was, $5 off that 12-stem bouquet of roses, or really paid for that visibility. And so I think for retail especially, it's really those seasonal moments that are special that merchants can really stand out by investing in their own growth.
So I don't want to be sizist here, obviously, with all phones are welcome, but think about sort of large merchants, and I think it's interesting because they're obviously more sophisticated, they have more resources to sort of think about each platform. What does like an Albertsons or a Sephora or a Best Buy, what do they do on a online delivery platform, and like what can the world learn from that?
Yeah, I think those are three great merchants as an example. Obviously, we talked a lot already about merchandising. I won't belabor the point, but merchandising, important, please, if there's one thing that you can take away. But no, I think that I already spoke about this. Uber has a really special use case in the sense that we can very much empower you to order a charger when you land at an airport. I already spoke a little bit about that. But I think what Best Buy and Sephora have done specifically on the retail side is there are a few things. But the first is they've made items that consumers know very visible. And so you're much more likely to order AirPods, you know it, iPad, you know it, the charger brand that you know, and I think that that's really important on our app, especially because it is a top-up use case, and so familiarity is important. I think the second thing I would say for these retail merchants is playing into cultural moments, and so, if Rihanna's performing at the Super Bowl, putting Fenty makeup front and center. If it's Halloween, putting really colorful eyeshadow palettes front and center. Those types of things, I think, are really imperative for our retail moments. And then I will say the last thing is, I talked a lot about insights, but I think feeding into those insights and making sure that if you know items are bestsellers on the Uber Eats app, you're putting them front and center. Those things are really important. And I think that Best Buy and Sephora are both doing that very well and are just exceptional partners to us. On the grocery side, it's actually a little different. So what I will say on grocery is that what we're really looking when we merchandise is what items are you adding to your cart first, and then what items are you adding most often? And those are the two most important things when we think about merchandising. And ACI, Albertsons, is a great partner to us in that sense. They just ran a month-long stock-up sale where they really played into that use case. But again, I think for all of these, it really goes back to the merchandising strategy on our app is not the same as the other channels, and really creating something custom is exceptionally important. And then, again, just sending us the best possible catalog data, the most visibility, the most you can do on merchandising, all of those things play into it as well.
So I think for the urbanists in the audience, they might be thinking less about the sort of big box chain stores, but more about the mom and pops, the local shops that sort of make a city interesting, give the kind of color and texture to a place that people like living and shopping and exploring in. How can local mom and pops use Uber Eats? Like, what is the platform as a way of sort of keeping a small business viable?
Yes, so you're not sizist. But no, what I will say is, well, first off, I know I've talked about how I've been with Uber for a decade, Uber Eats specifically, and I will say that the first year of that decade, we only had SMB restaurants on our platform. We hadn't even gotten into enterprise yet. And so I really think that local commerce is the core of what we do. I really believe that. I talked about this a little bit. I think something that makes SMBs really special is we talked about the incremental use case, but for SMBs, they're also getting an incremental customer, right? I think everybody's had the experience where they go into an app and they want to order something for dinner, but they don't know what they want to order, and you're ordering from a restaurant that you've never ordered before. And we're seeing the same thing on the grocery and retail side. And so again, that's why I think visibility and paying for ads and offers just is so important for SMBs, and we talked about that a bunch. But I will also say that the element of discoverability has really shown in the data. And so on average, SMBs that are on third-party apps, actually third-party applications make up 10% of their revenue on average now. And on the grocery and retail side, the SMBs that we work with most closely are actually liquor stores. And so I actually was just in New York and meeting with a couple of liquor merchants who told us that Uber Eats is now 40% of their total revenue because they've just invested in their discoverability and had so much success in our app. And obviously those are moments for me that, make all the late nights worth it because you can actually see the results tangibly in front of you. But what I would say here for SMBs is that we are really, as a company, trying to invest as well. You can see with our most recent partnership with OpenTable, where you can actually go into the Uber app and book a dinner reservation, that it's something that we're not only asking them to invest in, but we really want to invest in that discoverability and the ease of search on our side as well. And so I think it's two-sided, but I think that, for these SMBs, it's even more special because of the chunk of revenue we make up.
I want to sort of tie everything together for the final thought here. So the audience, we have some technologists, we have some policymakers. I think top of mind for everyone is one, like AI as a sort of search and discovery platform, and then two, the sort of AV delivery bot, of which we have so many outside. How are you thinking about that, and how do you think merchants, policymakers, how do you tie that all together?
Yes. Okay, so first off, not on AI or autonomous, but I will just say on innovation generally, really excited to announce that we are rolling out returns on the Uber Eats app, which I think is just so important for retail merchant, and we're actually the first third-party delivery app to do this. And so we talked a lot about go anywhere, get anything. Now you'll be able to return anything. And so I talked about my 4-year-old a little bit. I won't belabor a point, but she recently had an absolute meltdown that I did not buy the shade of pink of pens that she wanted. And so now I will be able to return the wrong shade of pink and hopefully one day get the right one. But it's really exciting because obviously returns are such an important part of retail in general. And so the fact that we're able to make this so seamless on our app, as we've made all these other use cases so seamless, is just really important to us. On the core of your question, AI and autonomous. So first off, I got back from Shop Talk a few weeks ago. I will say AI was everywhere. I think it's the question that everybody is asking around the industry. I think that there's still a lot to be determined on grocery and retail and how AI specifically fits into this industry. I think that there are a lot of merchant partners who are doing some really innovative things. We talked about Sephora earlier. That's a great example. But what I will say is that the way that it, is most core to Uber is through personalization. So we've been using AI and machine learnings for a while, but what we believe that this will allow us to do is make everyone's app even more personalized and even more custom to them, which we're really excited about. And right now we make 10 million predictions per second, which is absolutely wild. So I think that, that will play into this quite a bit. And then I think time will tell in terms of how we can best partner with our merchant partners on this. And I think that there are a lot of ways that we're brainstorming that will be really exciting. I will say on autonomous, and we have a lot of our incredible autonomous partners in this audience. For us, what autonomous will really do for us in the delivery industry is I talked about making deliveries as efficiently as possible, and autonomous will really enable us to do this even more so. And so we're really excited about the prospects there. But what I'll say to everyone, to our merchant partners, to the policymakers, to whomever, is I think what's really important is that we all remain really flexible. I mean, if you think about where we were last year, it's obviously both of these spaces have changed so much. I think that will be true next year as well. And so I think as flexible as we can be and as innovative as we can be and as fast as we can be, everybody will end up winners. So.
Thanks so much, Beryl.
Thank you, Jonah.